Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Meteorology Lab, Thursday evening here, and we've got a storm coming in from the west and expecting some severe weather for tomorrow into tomorrow night. So let's go ahead and head straight to the charts. So yeah, we've got a pretty dynamic pattern out there in the Pacific front moving in from the west there, and this is all Pacific air moving through California, Nevada, and Utah. The dry line is set up, and let's see if we can identify that. Let me try doing the dew point plots. Okay, dew point. I'm going to plot degrees Fahrenheit, and that should be coming up. So that gives us a rough idea where the dry line is, and we can go ahead and place that, and that's going to be, of course, on the moist side of that gradient, so roughly like that. And then plotting the surface plots, we got 60 degrees there at Oklahoma City, 64 at Fort Worth, and 66 at San Antonio. And that dry line is in full force there. Winds gusting up to 45 at Tucumcari, and temperatures well up into the 90s across much of that region. So we'll take a look at a couple soundings. We can see that Amarillo is going to be back in the dry air. Same thing with Midland. We know that Fort Worth is going to be in the moist air, same at Oklahoma City and Del Rio, and pretty much all the eastern stations, including Topeka. And wow, look at that, gust up to 40 at DFW, so no wonder we cannot get the drone up there. So 40 knots, that's going to be about 46 miles an hour. And the trick to convert that, you take that 40, you divide that by 10, which is 4, and then you add half of that, which is another 2. So 4 plus 2 plus 40, that's going to be 46. So that's a quick way of converting knots to miles an hour. All right, let's head to the other charts. And in fact, actually, let me do this. Let me zoom in on the desert Southwest and West Texas. That should certainly be pretty interesting. So let me set the chart up, and we'll get that focused on New Mexico, West Texas. Let me zoom that out just a little bit more. And this way we can take a close look at the air mass that we've got across the Four Corners and High Plains. Okay, so there we go. We've got the plots. The dry line is pretty easy to pick out. See that 24-degree reading there at Clinton, contrasting sharply with Oklahoma City. Here at Snyder, Texas, 30 degrees, contrasting with, looks like 53. I think that's 53 there, 61 at Stephenville. So we're going to place that kind of in this area right here. And that's our dry line. And then the cold front, that's a good question. If we go from east to west, temperatures are quite warm, close to 90. Same thing at Tucumcari. And then once we get to Klein's Corner, 70. Of course, Klein's Corner is pretty high elevation. 77 at Albuquerque, that's pretty high. And then they start falling off pretty quickly as you go towards Arizona. So 67. 68, and then all the way down to 51 and 67. So that's going to point to the cold front being in this region right in here. Another trick we can do is to plot the potential temperature. So we'll give that a shot and see what happens. Okay, so what this is telling us is that the thermal ridge is around Roswell, Tucumcari, Dalhart. So that kind of tells us that that is the air mass behind the dry line, out to the west of that dry line. So very likely within this zone here, the cold front does not exist in that region. So if we track this from east to west, we don't really hit the gradient until we get to the area west of Albuquerque. So we can kind of follow maybe that potential temperature line right there, and that'll give us where the cold front is located. Then we have another front up to the north. Northeasterly winds there up around Garden City to Grand Island, Nebraska. And that origin is coming from the Great Lakes area. That's Canadian air coming southward. And that will enter the picture here in the next day or two. It's going to come around on the backside of that weather system as it sweeps to the east. Okay, let's head into some of the other charts here. I'm going to look at that southwestern sector on SPC's website. And I want to take a look at that velocity tensor magnitude product because it gives us the theta, so we can kind of compare that to digital atmosphere and see how that looks. And so that's giving us the location of that cold front kind of in the same area there. And that'll be important because as that moves further to the east, we're going to see that really start appearing on the surface charts overnight into tomorrow morning. Also, the velocity tensor magnitude helps us find where there's, I guess we could say, kind of distortion of the volume there, which is what we see along frontal zones. So this can sometimes help us to find where the front is located. It doesn't show up so well in there, but it does look like there's a boundary up to the north. That's probably a secondary front back there. Looks like an origin further up the coast, maybe Washington, Oregon, somewhere up there, but that's a distinctly different air mass. And then, of course, we can see the Canadian air mass showing up very well there from Denver down to the Garden City area. So that gives us kind of the picture there where the air masses are located. So I'm going to go with something like this for the analysis. Probably going to be a low pressure area in here somewhere, and then kind of a secondary front back over Utah. And then, of course, the dry line, but that's way out to the east. So that's kind of the setup there. And let me switch that out to the Great Plains. And surprisingly, the dry line showing up pretty well in that velocity tensor magnitude field. So we're not going to use the potential temperature, of course, because this is a boundary that's more tied to moisture. So could go off down towards southwestern Texas that way. And let's see if there's a product for that. Yeah, we can pull up the theta. Actually, let me get a different product here. I think they've got a dew point. I'm trying to figure out where that is. All right, dew point. Which of all these? Okay, yeah, it's going to be the green and blue shading that you see here. So that's going to put the dry line roughly in the Wichita Falls area. It looks like that actually goes south into the central Texas area. So there's a lot going on tonight, and tomorrow we're going to be looking at that front coming out of New Mexico into the Texas Panhandle, and we already know that there's going to be storms somewhere east of Dallas, east of Tulsa, and maybe east of Waco there. Okay, this is probably a good time to get into the big picture. So this is the isobars and the thickness. So now we can take what we saw there on the surface chart, for example, in digital atmosphere, and we can link that to the large scale, the synoptic scale there. And that supports a front right back there in western New Mexico. And then we haven't really looked at the warm front very much, but it appears that connects up to that Canadian front up there in the plains. So there it is. Probably a stationary front up there in the I-70 corridor. And then the dry line is going to be roughly in that trough right there. So that's the setup this evening. And this also shows where our air mass sources are. This is the core of the coldest air up there in the Great Basin area, Washington and Oregon. And then the secondary source up here, the Canadian Hudson Bay Vortex up there. So those are going to be sweeping in here over the next couple days. And yeah, it looks actually pretty quiet out there to the west. Not much going on. So this is probably a good time to switch over to the satellite. And while you look at that, we'll check in on chat there. So let's see, do I go with goes west or goes east? I guess we can look at goes west there for a change. So there is the setup. One of the first barotropic systems up there over Colorado, Nebraska, and Wyoming there. And the dry slot working in very aggressively in from Arizona there. Okay, let's see. We got a pretty busy chat tonight, and we got Fun with Tech here. We have Burl H, Sue M, Eddie W, Ron Chalfant, Southern California, reporting 49 up there in the mountains. Christian Flock in Yukon, Oklahoma, 81 degrees, and watching that dry line. Extreme wildfires out there in western Oklahoma. We have Meat Puppet here and Blawas from East Texas, not too far away. David Moore, reporting DFW, had 81 degrees with a 63 dew point. Winds gusting to 36. And dew point 28 up to the northwest of there, 200 miles to the northwest. Meat Puppet reporting 7 Celsius, 45 Fahrenheit there in southwest England. Looking forward to spring. Rick McAllister is here. Wild Joker 12,000, reporting windy in Denver, and the hazard map has 5 different hazards coded. Meat Puppet reporting F1 in China this weekend, Formula 1 racing. So he's up at 2 a.m. to catch that live. Alex Wade saw a storm tracking vehicle near DFW Airport. Carl Berghoff having severe network issues. Ron Chalfant reminds us, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you already haven't. Yeah, we are coming up to 2,000 on those subscriber numbers, so we may be there later this month. Wild Joker looking at digital atmosphere and some data on the train, and Carl Berghoff saying it's going to be very windy here on Saturday. Winds up to 40 with wet snow. And yeah, well, believe me, I hope you don't lose power either. Carl, you might have to remind me where you're at. My memory is not very good these days, but anyway, it does sound like you're up to the north there with that wet snow. Okay, let's head into the other satellite photo. This is the infrared imagery, and this is showing one of our first short waves moving there through Nebraska. So we'll look at that on the upper level chart. And conditions look very unstable there in the Great Basin area. Looks like some convective showers around Salt Lake City, Elko, St. George, Cedar City, and Boise. And here in Texas, we're just waiting for the rest of that moisture to work its way north. We've got the dew point up to about 62, 63. However, I would expect that the depth would be lacking a bit. Let's look at the SCU-T. There's the current SCU-T there at Fort Worth. And we start out with 59 dew point there, but you can see the moisture does drop off. And then just only a few hundred feet off the surface, dew point is only 50. And then goes into the 40s there. So even though we do show a loaded gun sounding here, the moisture is still not up to the levels we usually see during severe weather outbreaks. We really need to see that sounding running something like that right there. So if we lift this up and figure the convective temperature, we're looking at a convective temperature of about 102 Fahrenheit. So obviously we're not going to be anywhere near that. We're very strongly capped. However, if we were to increase the moisture a bit to low 60s dew points, maybe something like that right there, let's see what the convective temperature would be. It would still be pretty high due to the influence of that cap, but it looks like the convective temperature comes down a bit. But the approach of that trough from the west is going to erode a lot of this warm air, and that should allow us to reach those convective temperatures tomorrow. That, with the moisture advection in the lower levels, we should be looking at storms tomorrow. And the wind field should also improve overnight into tomorrow. So let me just take a quick look for my reference, figure out how strong the cap is. 700 millibars, that's a good way to judge the cap there. We look at the temperature, and that's showing about 12 Celsius. So anything over 10 is actually pretty strong this time of year. So we're going to be looking for that 12 Celsius to start dropping as that trough approaches. And then the center of the cap, that's going to be about the 800 millibar level up at about 7,000 feet there. And then we'll take a look at a couple of other soundings. Norman, similar picture. Cap a little bit weaker there. If we take Fort Worth's moisture and superimpose that on their cap there, we're still looking at about 102 degrees for that convective temperature. And we'll take a look west of the dry line, Amarillo, showing kind of that inverted V there. Lots of dry air in the lower and mid levels, and almost a dry adiabatic lapse right there. Temperatures very warm there, and also we have lots of cold air since we're fairly close to that upper level trough. So the contrast between the very warm conditions and the very cold conditions aloft, that gives us a very steep lapse right there. And that's one reason we were able to pick up a lot of dust out there in West Texas. Very unstable, and vertical motions are favored in there quite a bit. And then one more sounding we'll look at is Midland. Also back there behind the cap, but it looks like we have some mid-level moisture in that region right there. Probably a little altocumulus up there at about 15 to 20,000 feet. Okay, let's take a look at some of the other charts. The upper level 250 millibar chart for this morning, showing that trough out over the west coast there, and that's moving east. So right around now we're probably looking at that over Utah, Nevada, approaching the Great Plains. The 700 millibar chart, that's very good for judging the cap strength. So here we look at the temperatures, and you can see 10 degrees we had this morning at Fort Worth. Obviously that strengthened a little bit. We caught some of that 12 there. And most of the other stations here are looking pretty warm there across the southern plains. It's going to be the approach of these cooler temperatures at 700 that will help remove the cap. And it's not temperature advection that does it, but it's vertical lifting of the column. Okay, and this is pretty cool. You can see the 700 millibar cold front shown up very well there with that 700 millibar temperature gradient back behind it. So we can take that and kind of compare the fronts. We're going to expect to find the 850 millibar front towards the warm air. Frontal systems always stack down towards the cold air, or I'm sorry, down towards the warm air and up towards the cold air. So this would be 850 millibars. The 700 millibar front would be about right here, and then the 500 millibar front would probably be even further west. So if you're having trouble trying to find the surface front, you can use that as a rule of thumb. So start out there at 700 and then start looking for it in this area. And we do know that the actual location is right around here. So there we go. We've got vertical consistency of that frontal system in that area. Okay, it's probably about time to take our sneak peek there, looking at the NAM. I don't know if you can hear Cujo barking out there, but he's really going at it. Okay, so there we go. Lots of warm air off the cap rock, very strong downslope there. And we can see that temperatures probably got close to 100 degrees there, just east of Amarillo and Lubbock. In fact, yeah, going for 101 there at Childress and around Guthrie. Okay, let's see what's going to happen tomorrow. Tomorrow morning, still gusty south winds bringing up that moisture, and looks like we can kind of pick out where that front is. Showing that temperature gradient there, going from about 78 at Abilene, 75 there at Childress, all the way down to the 50s in Roswell and Tucumcari. So that right there is the cold front approaching, and it looks like this feature here, that appears to be the dry line. And then we can also see the Canadian cold front coming south. So a lot of things to look at on this map, and we'll roll that forward up to convection time. And it appears at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. that dry line is going to extend from about Tulsa down to about Fort Worth. Oh, probably about Dallas there, and then down towards Austin, just north of San Antonio there. So it appears the European model was correct all along, going for the slower solution here. And then there's that Canadian front coming south, and then the Pacific front way back here. And it appears the model's already starting to break out a little bit of precip right along that dry line like that from I-20 northward. And then rolling it forward through the rest of the period, the cold front finally pushes its way eastward, rolling into East Texas around Tyler, down to Austin and San Antonio around midnight. Looks like some storms also going up out to the east. And I'm going by this clustered look where the computer is trying to plot isobar or isotherms in this area here. Those are the cold pools coming down from the storms, and we can kind of join those together and kind of see where that MCS is. And then for the rest of the period, everything's going to progress eastward pretty rapidly. MCS Saturday morning from Louisiana down to the Texas coast. And then cold air coming in the backside into Texas with highs around 58 there at Dallas, 65 at Midland, 52 at Amarillo, and 48 there at Oklahoma City. Okay, for a closer look, I think I've got the NAM products all queued up, so let me bring those up. And we will try to bring the weathercast on sometime tomorrow afternoon and monitor this event here. So starting out tomorrow morning, it's going to be looking like that. That right there, it appears there's some elevated convection moving across North Texas and Oklahoma there. And that's going to be sort of related to the erosion of the cap. That's going to be the cooling aloft starting to work on the area there. And then by evening, our dry line is somewhere in here, the cold front back in this region, and it appears we've only got some spotty convection there around the Durant, Oklahoma area, and that moves into the Fort Smith area. NAM is not very optimistic for convection. And it appears that it doesn't get going until it passes Shreveport and Lufkin there. So let's see what the problem is. Let me back this up to 0Z, and I'm going to take a sounding for around Kaufman or Canton, Texas. southeast of Dallas and see what's going on with the air mass. Very likely the cap may be a factor here. So we've got moisture dew point around 71 there. It is decreasing with height. And it looks like we've got cool conditions there, only 76 degrees. So it appears we have not quite enough heating to really break that cap initially. So most likely we're going to have to kind of evaluate things tomorrow morning to find out if the strength of the cap has changed, and also look for holes in the cloud cover that might assist with that heating. So let me go back to that NAM map. So I want to check something out here. Okay, this is tomorrow afternoon about 4 p.m. and looks like temperatures along the dry line are about 82 degrees. Only 73 up there at Muskogee, and then temperatures are actually pretty cool in East Texas. This is indicating a lot of stratocumulus and stratus coming northward. So that and some of the upper level clouds we were talking about yesterday, that may be one reason we're not seeing a lot of widespread convection tomorrow evening. So let me go back to the charts here. The sounding does look a little bit conducive for severe convection. So your Earth 1 kilometer shear looks pretty good, still looking at about 25 knots there. And let me take another sounding. I'm going to go a little further south around the Buffalo Centerville area. Again, this is southeast of Dallas. And it looks like we're still holding on to that cap there. And temperature's also pretty cool. Now I'm going to take a look at the Dallas area. Okay, so this is Dallas about 4 p.m. And still a little bit of a cap there, but temperatures in Dallas do come up into the low 80s. So let me see it. I don't see any real problems here with initiation. I mean, there's a little bit of capping there, and I suspect we may see a few more towers going up than the models are indicating. So yeah, it really comes down to splitting hairs with that cap there. And really about the only thing that's going to help with that is 0Z model data this evening, and then refine that further with 12Z model data tomorrow morning. So that'll be a problem mostly to tackle tomorrow. So let's go ahead and roll this forward. I guess we can take a look at theta E's. Let's see how that looks. This gives us kind of where the best parcels are. This is 4 p.m. showing the moisture axis roughly from about College Station up to around Kaufman and Canton, Greenville. And then by 5 p.m. or 7 p.m. there, looks like there's some mixing going on, some dry air coming down to the surface, but still the moisture axis running through that zone right there southeast of Dallas. So that's probably, that might be somewhere where some of the better prospects are in Texas. And then up in Oklahoma, that's going to depend on how much cap erosion they have out there and how much heating is going to be up in that region, because we were looking yesterday at cloud cover. Let me see if I can bring that up. I'm going to look at relative humidities at 200 millibars. I'm going to also pull down the 300 millibar chart. So this will give us an idea of high cloud cover. So this is 4 p.m. and indeed we're probably looking at scattered to broken layers from Dallas southward. And it looks a little bit better up to the north there in the Oklahoma City area. And then at 300 millibars, about 30,000 feet. pretty good band there of what looks like 60 to 70% relative humidity. That's probably going to indicate a broken layer interfering with heating there. So probably some of the better heating is going to be up there in Oklahoma, and down in Texas we'll just have to see how things stack up with the warning radiosonde data. And let's go ahead and look at the upper level dynamics there. This is the 500 millibar vorticity, heights and vorticity. And you can see that big trough there coming through the Four Corners area. A lot of ascent there in New Mexico and Colorado. By morning, the charts are going to be looking like this. Polar front jet from about Phoenix down to El Paso and then out into western Oklahoma there. And the flow looks mostly channeled there, but I think we've got maybe one shortwave there and another one up in the panhandles like that. So let's see what happens later during the day. And I can already kind of see a problem here. The flow is mostly channeled. I don't see a really good shortwave working on the air mass tomorrow. And it does kind of remind me of a few bus days from years ago. So there's not a whole lot of lift going on. We do have the height falls taking place, the large-scale height and pressure falls aloft. So that's going to cool down the column definitely, but I don't see any strong impulses coming around the south side of that trough that's really going to get things going. So it appears, yeah, not a whole lot going on, and we'll just kind of see that big trough roll eastward during the day, Saturday and Sunday. Okay, so let's go ahead and put it together with the NEM. Forward the rest of that through Friday. It does look like once the trough action itself rolls eastward across Arkansas and Louisiana, we will finally get enough height falls and steeper lapse rates to help break that cap, and we'll see an MCS blowing up over Louisiana and southeast Arkansas tomorrow night, and that'll move into the Mississippi area during the day. So probably some of the better prospects for severe weather Saturday will probably be along that line there in eastern Mississippi and northwestern Alabama. And behind that, the cold air coming southward. And we'll go ahead and switch over to the GFS. Okay, so yeah, we can definitely see that cold front. This is later tonight around midnight. The warm front up to the north. And then during the day tomorrow, cold front approaching from the west there. GFS going for a little bit of initiation there in East Texas. But it looks like some of that early activity during the day will be elevated early on there. And then there's an MCS there after dark. Cold front will be approaching from the west and up to the north. Got a pretty good bear clinic system up there in Iowa. And with that Gulf moisture heading northward over the warm front, we're going to see a lot of precip up there in Des Moines, Minneapolis, Sioux Falls, all the way back into Nebraska there. So it still looks like that rain-snow line is going to run from about Green Bay to Minneapolis. Same thing that we were looking at last night. And then things move eastward on Saturday into the southeast U.S. right there. And then for Sunday, looks like the Carolinas will be under the gun. And possibly some action all the way down into Florida there. Cold air coming behind, and there's that 540 line coming all the way down to Memphis and southwestern Minnesota there. So that's some definite cold air. And looks like our next front is already coming into California on Monday. So let's see what happens with that. Crossing the Rockies on Tuesday, and then it'll be emerging into the plains around Wednesday. I don't know if we've had enough time to really return the moisture. Let's see what that looks like in the Dallas area for Wednesday. And yeah, the moisture is not so great. 57 at the surface, and then just off the surface, 50 into the 40s. So these systems are coming a little bit too fast out of the west. So not much going on there for Wednesday and Thursday. We are still bringing up the moisture even on Thursday and Friday, and we may finally have enough in place for some storms along the dry line Thursday and Friday next week, and then possibly up along that warm front in Kansas, and then the cold front approaching from the west, and that'll be moving through Texas around Friday into Saturday. Probably storms all the way up and down the I-35 corridor. And then another weekend, MCS moving through Mississippi and Louisiana. Almost down to the exact day compared to this weekend. And then looks like we get into some ridging later in the month. That may shut down some of the activity temporarily, and then we've got some more Pacific systems moving in from the west. Looks like this next one will be approaching around the 27th and 28th. So, yeah, there's your 40-minute wrap-up of the weather. And let me take a quick look in chat. Okay, I'm just reading the chat here. A lot of discussion, so I'm not going to be able to read all of these. I'm sorry about that, but let's see. Ryan watching down there in Florida dealing with business duties. Ryan also waiting on that dry line there. Mike Estwick recommending reading up on the Denver convergence zone. Carl Berghoff suggesting to hit that like button. Yeah, please hit the like button. It just takes a couple of seconds there. Tim's severe storm forecasting book has a chart of the 700 millibar cap temperatures. I appreciate that. Cujo is chasing off ground squirrels. Yeah, no doubt there. Okay, and Michelle is going to research the Palmer Divide. And Mike Estwick recommended my books, weathergraphics.com. Yeah, definitely. I've got about 6 or 7 weather forecasting books, and I definitely recommend those. Let me just pull that up real quick. Yeah, if you go to weathergraphics.com, yeah, if you scroll down here, we've got the different books. And probably the best one that I would recommend, if you're just starting out, that's going to be the weather analysis and forecasting book. That's this one here. And then if you're more technically inclined, I would go with the severe storm forecasting book. And I wanted to point out, also, we do have a coupon for 20% off, not on the books, but on the software, data, and training. So you might want to look into that. That's at the top of the page, so feel free to check that out. And let's see. That's about all I got for tonight. And again, I will try to start the weathercast a little bit early during the day and do some hand analysis like we did last week. And I'll try to send out a Twitter notification about that once we go on. So yeah, keep your eyes open as far as that goes, and hopefully you'll be able to join us during the day, and we'll watch a severe weather event unfold there. Okay, I guess I'm going to head out and let y'all look at the rest of the weather picture there. So have a good evening, and we'll see y'all tomorrow. Take care.